Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, welcome, Dylan, to the Rock Island Wine. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. What you're doing is really cool, and I hope to contribute well to it.
Awesome. I'm not even sure what I'm doing, but we're doing something. So,
Something is happening,
yeah,
indeed.
yeah. And you are the alderperson for the Fifth Ward.
That's right. I have the
Okay.
privilege of representing Rock Island's 5th Ward on City Council since 2017, just starting my third term. The 5th Ward is from the river to 18th Avenue between 17th and 30th Streets.
Okay.
So most of downtown, not sort of the western edge of downtown, City Hall, the county administration building, that's all the 1st Ward. But most of what people think of downtown Rock Island, that's in the 5th Ward. The historic neighborhoods that surround downtown, like Broadway and Greenbush, and then all the way going up the hill to sort of the hilltop area, 18th Avenue. The corner of the 5th Ward is Walgreens there at 18th Avenue and 30th Street.
Oh.
So everything from Walgreens down to Five Points, so Dunkin' Donuts, CVS, that's all 5th Ward too.
Okay.
So it's a really diverse ward.
Yeah.
It's got two commercial corridors, the Hilltop commercial area, 18th Avenue and 30th Street. It's got downtown, of course, which is a big commercial area. And then it's got a variety of residential neighborhoods, Broadway, Greenbush, Highland Park, Hilltop, that are all very unique in their own way,
Yeah.
too.
So I was confused about that because I thought that Hilltop was in Mark's Ward.
Everything east of 30th Street is
Okay.
Mark's Ward.
So it's a little bit shared.
Yeah,
but-
so like Fred and Ethel's is in the 5th Ward, but Skylight Lounge is in the 6th Ward.
Okay.
So just a little slice of Hilltop is in the 5th Ward.
And then going down the hill, though, Augustana is in his ward.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, thinking about it, so everything west of, well, not everything, but west of 30th Street is the 5th Ward. So a lot of the Augustana
Can
rentals,
you hear me?
I can hear you in my left ear.
You can? I can't hear you in my ear. Hold on a second.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm not messing something up. Is that too loud?
I don't hear you now.
Okay. Now I can hear you.
You're much louder now.
I'm much louder. Too loud?
No,
Or
that's good.
Okay. Sorry. I'm so paranoid that it's not recording because I did this at the same time as that. So now I'm like, did I push that button?
Mm-hmm.
But it is red. So if for some reason this doesn't record, I will be
We'll do it
calling
again.
you again.
We'll do it again. I got time.
Okay, cool.
I don't mind.
Yeah. So so it's a little bit of Jenga with your neighbors.
Yeah, it's a variety of people. You know, the issues affecting Broadway or Greenbush in particular are not the ones that matter to Highland Park or Hilltop. You know, the thing about Rock Island is that we've got all these wonderful, unique neighborhoods with their own unique identification and identity. And it's fun representing a ward. I always say that the 5th Ward is the ward of neighborhoods. We've got all these different neighborhoods, and the entire city has lots of neighborhoods, but some strong, long-lasting, Broadway. When you think of neighborhoods in Rock Island, you think of Broadway. Very strong neighborhood pride in that community. Greenbush, Highland Park, we really like the neighborhood thing in the 5th Ward. So
I love that.
it's a fun place to represent.
Yeah, and that formation of neighborhoods, I think, helps residents to organize, to pull together an identity, to market.
Yeah.
When you have these more spread out neighborhoods or there's not that sense, it can become harder to unify or organize around a cause or getting some service. Do you find that your neighborhoods are organized?
Some more than others. Broadway certainly leads the pack in understanding how to get organized and make asks of the municipal government to the specific needs that the neighborhood has or wants. Other neighborhoods are in varying levels of organization, some more than others. But it is a good system to make sure that the needs and the vision of neighbors at the neighborhood level are communicated to the municipal government. And I've always, since I first was elected in 2017, I've tried to attend every single neighborhood meeting that I can. Some neighborhoods meet more frequently than others, but making sure to be present at those neighborhood meetings to everything from my neighbor's got a bunch of junk cars parked in his backyard. What can you do to that? To more macro things like how do we get more businesses in our neighborhood? But it's a really good opportunity to hear from residents and constituents as to what do they want. And then a lot of the time I'll bring resources from the city to those meetings too, to say, here's the community development director who's in charge of the housing rehabilitation program. Here's some resources that you may not know that the city has. And so then that's a way to also get information to residents about the different opportunities and resources the city has for residents.
You can forge those links in the chain.
Right.
Everything is everything. So if you think about a family, what voices are represented, how do you make choices, and then you've got your court or your street, and then you have your neighborhood, and then you have your city, and then you have your region, and these processes are happening at all these levels throughout our lives. And I feel like a trend in just paying attention to politics in general has been to pay attention to the biggest at the expense of, we can all get so into our phones and everything. It might even be at the expense of our little unit, let alone paying attention to what's going on your block or in your neighborhood, in your city.
Right.
Do you find that are residents engaged at the city level? Do you find they're paying more attention to national politics than local issues?
Well, certainly everything is nationalized now, right? Talk to anybody running for state representative in a state house across the country, and they're automatically associated with the national political parties, right? It very much is the case that everybody is consuming their news either through national outlets or social media, which is an entirely different animal. But how many people have a subscription to the local newspaper anymore? Very few do. And even the ability of local entities to report on the city government is really limited. We churn through reporters from the newspaper. Every single time I get to know the new reporter from the Quad City Times or Dispatch Argus, they're gone. They're replaced. They're laid off or somebody else is coming in. So I see it firsthand that the quality of local coverage for local government in Rock Island is really poor. And that's not criticizing, these entities, but just they're so resource strapped that, they're trying to cover all of these different local governments. They're trying to cover all of these things. And then, of course, state and international news as well. There's a lot of people don't know what's going on in their own local community.
And it's also within the own context of a family, a budget question. So now that everything is paywalled, to watch the local TV, to watch, I guess you could listen to the radio, but to read a story on Quad City Times, you have to pass a paywall. You can't just read news.
Right.
And so that becomes a real challenge too of who can afford to read the normal news outlets.
Right.
Yeah. So I've been asking everybody, just to back up a little bit, how does your journey with Rock Island begin? Where did you come to be a part of this city, and what's your Rock Island story?
Yeah. Well, it was not always certain that I was going to end up a Rock Islander. I grew up in Davenport, across the river. I had a pretty, I think, normal Iowan upbringing that a lot of Iowans experience, where there was absolutely no reason to ever cross that river, and I never did. My parents would occasionally take me to the Mark in downtown Moline for Disney on Ice or whatever, but other than that, we never stepped foot in the Illinois Quad Cities. Went to school over in the Iowa Quad Cities, did my shopping, visited friends, all in the Iowa Quad Cities, and did so for my initial, 18 years or so of my life. I went to Davenport Central High School. I went to St. Ambrose University, and when I was a young college student at St. Ambrose, the district was still sort of a thing. The sort of tail end of the downtown Rock Island district entertainment thing was still a thing. And so one of my friends from St. Ambrose said, let's go check out what's going on in downtown Rock Island. And actually, it wasn't necessarily the nightlife that I was first introduced to Rock Island, but it was Theo's Java Club. And it was a place, as you mentioned earlier, I was a philosophy major at St. Ambrose. And so Theo's was the place to be if you wanted to sit around, drink coffee, smoke cigarettes, and talk about philosophy, which I very much enjoyed doing as a young person. I still do. But yeah, that was the place to do it. And so I was introduced to downtown Rock Island through Theo's Java Club. And then, as I got a little older, was able to legally drink, or even before then, started visiting Steve's Old Time Tap, or, Blue Cat, some of the downtown entertainment destinations, and really fell in love with downtown Rock Island. I had a daughter when I was 16 years old. So my entire senior year of high school, I was a father. And so, for better or worse, I've been in the Quad Cities, and I'm still in the Quad Cities. I very much am a cosmopolitan type of person. I like big cities. I like multicultural places, unique experiences, things like that. And so I always envisioned myself moving on to some bigger city, move to Chicago, New York, etc. But I couldn't, because I had my daughter. I had to stay here in the Quad Cities. And obviously I know Rock Island is not Chicago, but being that kid from Iowa that was starry-eyed for the big city, there was just a little sense when I came across the Centennial Bridge and turned onto 3rd Avenue to go towards Theo's, that, the bus station was there at that time, and there was all these people hanging about and these bigger buildings in the downtown area. And I just was like, this is kind of like a little Chicago, a tiny, microscopic Chicago. But it sort of had that urban sense of being an urban place. And I really liked that a lot. As, again, being a country boy from Iowa, I wanted to be in a big city. And so it was as close as I could get to being into Chicago.
Yeah, I love how you say you turned the corner and it maybe felt a little more real or representative of the world, or a little bigger, a little, more mystery.
Yeah, and the more I learned about Rock Island, the more I was like, this is like a little Chicago. I mean, the unique identified neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that are literally called Old Chicago.
Right.
Our history in Rock Island is very connected to Chicago. I think culturally and in a lot of ways, Rock Island is very much connected to Chicago and sort of that business and cultural center. I think the Quad Cities is this interesting sort of separation between a Chicago-based sort of economy and lifestyle and culture, and then a more Midwestern, like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, maybe even. And they're not alike at all, in my opinion. And Rock Island very much is in that Chicago tradition, if you will. And so the more I learned about Rock Island, the history, the community, the culture, I was like, this place is awesome.
Yeah, a little more interesting to you.
Yeah.
And so when did you make the move and start to call this place home?
Yeah, so I moved to Rock Island in 2011. I graduated college December of 2010. And then I had a friend from, being in college. He didn't go to college with me, but the same age, a guy who I went to bars with in downtown Rock Island. He had an apartment in Greenbush across the street from the old Save-A-Lot. Now it's the Dollar General Market. But I moved in with him and have been in, briefly I lived up on 38th Street by Augustana. But other than that, I've lived in the 5th Ward the entire time that I've been in Rock Island.
I love that big street there where Save-A-Lot is.
Yeah.
That's such a big, grand street. I don't know. You just don't find really big streets like that aren't so busy.
Yeah.
I always look down that street and think, oh, there's so much potential there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you made Rock Island home in 2011, and you've basically lived in the 5th Ward your entire lifetime here.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting. You're the youngest person on council, but you're also the longest serving person on council.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of serving on Rock Island City Council now for 8 years. It's not much more than some of my colleagues on City Council, but a lot of my colleagues on City Council were elected 2 years after me. And all of the people that I was elected with back in 2017 are no longer on the City Council. So, yeah, it is this funny inversion version of being the youngest person on city council and also the senior.
Yes,
older
you're
person.
the elder,
I'm the
statesman
elder.
with the, yeah.
Yeah, and it certainly has, it brings its own perspective and experience. 8 years in, I've learned so much being on Rock Island City Council. And now it's kind of fun seeing the new people like the mayor coming in and just being like, I remember that, or seeing myself in some of the newer elected officials and kind of knowing how things will play out. So it's kind of fun.
I just am trying to cover the meetings in these little 5-minute episodes.
Yeah,
and
those are wonderful, by the way.
Yeah.
Please keep doing that. It's so helpful to get that little snapshot.
Yeah, just because a lot of people can't go to a city council meeting. You're not going to sit there and watch the hour meeting. But even just trying to figure out what is a first reading and what's a second, and sometimes you guys will vote to bypass the rules and just adopt something, and so I'm still kind of figuring that out. Like, wait, they're talking about this issue again.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the caps on marijuana licenses. So you're saying we're only going to issue 2 for the city, and you get to decide who has them, and then you have a first reading. And you approve it, and like, why do you have to? Is it just so you have more time to think about it, and then you read it again, and you
it's a combination of allowing the city council more time to consider the issue, but also allowing the public more time to be aware of what the city is considering doing and providing feedback. If you require 2 separate readings, then obviously if somebody becomes aware of something during the first reading, they can organize against it if they don't like it, or for it if they do, for example. But it just provides more opportunity for the city to get input from residents and allow the city council to think, maybe I hadn't thought about that, or a different perspective or something like that. That's the idea behind that.
Is that required in our laws about how we govern ourselves, or do you just say, okay, on this issue we're going to have 2 readings and then go to a vote?
Our code of ordinances lay out what types of actions by the city requires 2 multiple readings. Some things are dictated by state law, require multiple readings. Some things our own internal ordinances dictate what requires 2 readings. A lot of the time, the rules will dictate that it requires 2 readings, except for in the case where we want to suspend the rules, for example, as you referenced, where then we can shortcut it and just do it in 1 reading. But yeah, it's a variety of legal reasons why we would do something one way versus the other.
Yeah, and I can see why a city would want to have that process to allow more time. It probably increases transparency, it increases trust. You're not trying to rush anything through, because you could raise an issue, vote on it before anyone really knew, unless they were like combing through the agendas, knew what was up. So yeah, I think it's great that they do that. But as I'm trying to learn, I'm like, okay, wait, what? They're reading through this again?
Just because we vote on something does not mean it's final, right? I mean, some things might need multiple readings. And so people will think, they voted it down or up. And if they're upset with that, they're discouraged that it happened. But if there's multiple readings, it doesn't mean that it's a done deal.
Yeah, you're basically just voting to continue exploring the issue, or to continue talking about it.
Yeah, until the final reading, of course. And my attitude on suspending the rules and passing things in 1 reading has changed over time. I was originally very opposed to doing that for the, wanting transparency and the reasons that we're discussing. I have learned over the years the benefit of sometimes expediting non-controversial things. If nobody cares and it would help somebody facilitate a business locating in downtown Rock Island quicker, for example, then sure, why not? There's no real reason. But there's many times, like the parking restrictions that currently we've been voting on in Highland Park the last 2 city council meetings. That could have been not the most recent city council meeting on Monday, but the one before that. Could have suspended the rules and passed it in 1, but it's a little controversial among my constituents. There was a number of them at the meeting that spoke on the matter, and so it's like, well, let's just take this slow and give people the opportunity to provide input if they want. It just sort of, you kind of feel it out, what's
balancing the value of that transparency and participation, but on the other hand, on the other hand, efficiency.
Right.
So if your local government makes it really cumbersome to do anything, it might drive people away from using local government as an apparatus to get stuff done.
Right.
If it's like, okay, well, we'll get to this in 9 months. Yeah.
It's
So
a
you're always
balancing act.
balancing those competing
Yeah.
interests. And how did you, like, what motivated you? You moved to Rock Island in 2011, set up life here.
Right.
At what point did you start to think, I'm going to get involved in local politics?
Yeah. Well, I've always been politically active. High school student, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were ratcheting up. I had a number of friends who graduated from high school and joined the military and were shipped off to Iraq and Afghanistan. So always, at a young age, became politically aware and exercised my rights to voice my freedom of speech and protest and all that good stuff. So it started out very much in anti-war activism, stuff like that. Grew into environmental sort of concerns, but always just politically involved in one way or the other. Two main points led me to running for city council. One, the Bernie Sanders 2016 presidential campaign. I was very involved in that effort. I was a delegate to the 2016 Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, pledged to Bernie Sanders. And of course, Bernie didn't win, which was regrettable, but it was what it was. But Bernie said, not me, us, right? And he encouraged all of his supporters to take courage in the results of that election and go back home and run for local office. And I took him seriously on that and said, okay, I'll do that. I can do that. If all of us go home to our different local communities and run for office, then maybe we could make a change in this country. So I bought what Bernie was selling. And so I was like, well, sure, I'll run for local office. But then the second thing, more specific to Rock Island, 2016, 2017, there were a number of controversies that roiled Rock Island. The biggest one, of course, was Walmart. The failure of the city to get Walmart to come here. And not even, now that I'm on city council, I can understand what the city council was trying to do. I can somewhat sympathize. Sure, people can criticize and say, well, you never had anything in writing and whatever. People can have their opinions on that whole proposal of what they want. But the thing...
There probably was stuff in writing, it just wasn't signed. I'm guessing there was some paper floating around with writing on it, but maybe it just wasn't signed.
Maybe. I don't know.
The ink wasn't dry.
I wasn't there, so
Yeah.
I won't comment. But really what it was to me was a sort of, again, philosophical shift in the municipal government for Rock Island, where I felt like the city council had lost track of understanding what are the assets of our community, what makes Rock Island unique, what deserves protecting, what deserves shoring up and building, versus not doing things that we're not good at. Rock Island is simply not good at suburban style development. We don't have endless miles of cornfield that can be easily plowed up into housing, McMansions or betplexes or strip malls. It's just the built environment is not conducive to that type of development in Rock Island. And I thought that the Walmart situation was a real strategic error on the city council to confuse where should we be deploying resources in Rock Island and how do we want to pursue development in Rock Island. And they wanted to pursue extremely expensive suburban style commercial development, and it didn't work, and it continues to not work. We have a big empty lot still on 11th Street, and I have thoughts on that. But the reason that I ran for city council is because I thought that the city was failing to understand what makes us unique and what makes us special, and wanting us to be someplace that we are not.
Yeah, which requires you have a vision, that you have an identity, that somewhere in your mind you're like, this is the type of business I see here. This is the type of daily life that I see here. Is your vision the same as it was when you ran? Has it shifted over time? When you kind of highlighted those things, I want the council to have a realistic vision of what our city is, and realistic ideas about what can flourish here and what won't.
Right.
Do you feel like, does that feel more clear to you as you've been in the role then of city councilor, or does it feel less clear?
My vision remains as clear as it ever was. I moved from Davenport to Rock Island because I understood innately what is special about this place. I mean, I just felt it. I naturally was gravitated towards it. I've been able to add sort of language like sense of place and sort of buzzwords and stuff like that through learning through this process, but really still understanding what is unique and special about Rock Island has not changed. The things that have changed is understanding, it's very difficult to figure out how to support those unique assets, right? I'm still, I have always recognized that historic preservation, our historic neighborhoods, our historic downtown, are an asset for Rock Island. And when Rock Island led the Quad Cities in sort of pioneering historic preservation as a means for economic development and sense of place building, I still have difficulty with figuring out how can we allocate resources towards those efforts. Those are kind of nice to have things. They're not fundamental like services that people expect the city government to offer, like fire protection, for example. But for Rock Island, they kind of are. You got to have it, because if we don't have those unique assets, then we don't have much, because traditional suburban development is so hard to do in Rock Island. So the thing that has changed over the years has been just realizing how difficult it is to do the thing. I recognize my vision is the same, but figuring out how to make the vision a reality has become much more difficult.
Yeah. You have all these treasured places that are special, and it's like you said, the trick of how to support them.
Mm-hmm.
And the city sometimes has a view of bringing in something new.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of might chase what is shiny.
Sure.
And can lose sight, or it can be hard to square that with investing what's already there.
Yeah.
So investing in a Theo's in the same way that we'd be like, oh, there's a new coffee shop coming.
Right.
How do we get this new coffee shop? And it's like, well, you have this great coffee shop. Are there ways to support that?
Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a matter of what resources does the city have available to lend businesses. So many of the incentives that the city has offered businesses and developers are associated with building improvements, because we recognize that the property stock that exists in the city is very, frankly, deteriorated and old. We're a very old city, and
we're the oldest city
in many
the
metrics.
Quad Cities.
Well, and not only like history, us being old, but residents. I mean, our population is very old relative to other communities. So in a lot of ways, we're an old community. But recognizing that our property stock, commercial, residential, is older, that has costs associated with it. Older buildings need improvements and rehab, which is expensive. And so we've tried to target our incentives that we offer to not just like cash giveaways to property business owners, but to ways to kind of two birds with one stone. Well, we can help out your business by paying to improve your building.
Right.
For
if you have a structural issue, or energy efficient windows, or I'm kind of making stuff up, but things that would,
you got the idea.
Yeah, things that would help the kind of building infrastructure of the city while helping business owners and residents. And
and so then when you have businesses like Theo's, for example, where it's like, Theo's 2.0, when the new owner came in, they made a huge investment in that property, and they made a lot of physical asset improvements to the property. But we don't have anything to really help businesses on like an operational level. And it's a big question as to, is it an appropriate role for the city government to assist businesses in an operational capacity?
Because we have so many branches of our economic development. The city has an economic development department, and then we have the Downtown Alliance, and then we have the Downtown Association of Rock Island.
That doesn't exist anymore.
DARI? Is that
the Development Association of Rock Island?
Is that what that's called? DARI?
DARI.
It's not a thing anymore?
DARI is. The Downtown Rock Island Partnership is not.
Okay.
But yeah, sorry.
And the thing that Jack Colin is doing that's through the Chamber of Commerce, and that's specifically, the Downtown Alliance is specifically for everything going on downtown.
Yeah.
And he's done such a great job.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And I am renting this little space down there, so I called Jack and I said, I want to do this thing, and he, within the next day, I think, was like, here's 3 or 4 different properties you can reach out to, here's the phone numbers. So I can see that as someone's interested, you're linked into this person that's trying to push you in the right direction, and then, here's a couple programs that you could maybe apply for. But how does like the city's economic development work with DARI? Those two.
It's a lasagna. So the city of Rock Island has a number of economic development partners. We have regional partners like the Quad Cities Chamber of Commerce or Visit Quad Cities, our destination management and marketing organization for the Quad Cities. We have municipal-wide partners like DARI, the Development Association of Rock Island, and then we have local economic development partners, neighborhood-level partners like the Rock Island Downtown Alliance, which is in downtown, obviously. Actually, currently, the city of Rock Island is procuring an economic development strategic plan for this very purpose of like, okay, we got all these partners. What is going on? Who's doing what? And how does this all work? So briefly.
Well, and like as a small business person, I think one of the reasons I've been successful is because anytime you're doing a new thing, everyone's going to tell you need a plan and you need a person to do this thing for you and you need an attorney to do this thing for you. And when you're in a grittier city where you're doing these startups and you're trying to build business, I mean, keeping those costs low for business developers or little entrepreneurs, you maybe run into the same thing at the city level. Like everything that's small is big. So if I'm starting my own business and I'm like, now I need 5 experts to tell me what to do and to advise me, and I got to pay everybody. I see businesses kind of go under because there's so much outsourcing and not enough confidence in what you can do yourself.
Right.
And sometimes when I look at the economic stuff in Rock Island, and I could be 100% off base, but I'm like, how many people do we pay to economically develop us where we could be doing maybe more Curliff loans, revolving loans, or working really hard on like a business incubation where we have, I would totally volunteer to mentor a little business person in Rock Island about how to be economically, like financially responsible but I'm just curious, like how much do you can't tell me this today, you won't know off the top of your head, but how much are we paying to have all this economic development that's just like telling us how to do economic development rather than just, okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just give some entrepreneurs some money.
Well, I would say none of our economic development partners are in a consulting role.
Okay.
Right? So we'll just walk through our partners and explain how it works. So the Chamber of Commerce is our regional economic development partner. And their primary role, the reason that we partner with them, is that they facilitate inbound requests for proposals from businesses that come in from the state of Illinois. So your big corporations, they contact all the different state entities. Like in Illinois, it's Intersect Illinois. That's the state entity that handles business interests statewide. So we'll just use Amazon as an example, right? Amazon contacts Intersect Illinois and says, we want to build 30 factories. Here's the specifications. We need this much acreage. We need these types of utilities, etc. What do you have in Illinois available for that matches these specs? Intersect Illinois will reach out to its different regional partners to further along that message and say, we got a prospect that's looking for this type of property. What do you got? The Chamber of Commerce is our regional connection with Intersect Illinois. So Intersect Illinois will will send that request from Amazon to the Chamber of Commerce here in the Quad Cities. The Chamber of Commerce then takes that and reaches out to all of our local partners, so the city of Rock Island, the city of Moline, the city of East Moline, and says, we got a request from Amazon through Intersect Illinois that says, what do you got? Here's what we need. What do you got? So then the city's economic development team will go through our inventory of potential sites that match the requirements of the solicitation, and we'll send that to the Chamber of Commerce, who will then send that to Intersect Illinois, who will then send that to Amazon. Amazon makes the decision as to where they want to go.
Okay.
In Rock Island, an example of this happening is the FedEx facility out in Southwest Rock Island. That's been a number of years ago now when that was built, but that was that process. FedEx contacted Intersect Illinois, said, we want to build distribution facilities. Intersect Illinois reached out to the Chamber reached out to Rock Island. Rock Island said, we have this site in the Southwest Industrial Park, sent it back up through the chain. FedEx ultimately chose that location in Rock Island to build. So,
and I love that example because you can really get kind of a return on investment figure if you wanted to. You could say we paid $35,000 this year for this relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, and we get back this much in sales tax and property tax revenue over this period of time. And
the difficulty and the way in which Rock Island always feels like it's being ripped off, frankly, is that type of economic development, again, does not suit the assets that the city of Rock Island has. We have very few open sites ready for development that are suitable for an Amazon, a FedEx, whatever, to build.
And it's also passive. It's like we're waiting for someone to use this Intersect to ask us if there's opportunity. Right. It's not, does the Chamber go out and pitch Rock Island to?
The Chamber goes out and pitches the Quad Cities. Mm-hmm. They don't pitch local communities within the Quad Cities.
Okay.
That's each municipal government's responsibility. Once they've got a lead saying, okay, we're interested in moving to the Quad Cities, then the individual municipalities fight over the development. But the Chamber doesn't pitch Rock Island specifically, for example. But yeah, in addition to, the Chamber does a lot of things. One of the ways that the city explicitly partners with the Chamber is through this Intersect Illinois relationship, which it does work. And it's good for us to be in the room getting, the requests from businesses through Intersect Illinois. But because of our site readiness being so difficult in Rock Island, we get to take advantage of very few of those opportunities. And they always go to, because of course they're contacting the Chamber, so is the Iowa entity. And so the Chamber is the Iowa community's, entity. And so they're pitching the same thing to Davenport and Bettendorf. And so then Sterilite builds their new factory in Davenport, where there's much more site readiness available than Rock Island, for example. So, right. It's one of those things where it's like, well, it's worthwhile to keep paying for that relationship with the Chamber of Commerce so that we do get the pitches on the rare occasion that it does work, because on occasion it does, like I said, FedEx. But that's not going to be our saving ticket in Rock Island.
And I'm on like the legislative committee for the Chamber.
Yeah.
And so I have more of an interest in the Illinois side, but sitting in those meetings and hearing what's coming from the state in Illinois, and we hear what's coming for Iowa. And so I guess in that way they're trying to keep abreast of legislation that might affect us, different things that we can take advantage of. So it is probably hard to quantify how that whole picture from the Chamber of Commerce helps Rock Island, but and we're part of this region, like we kind of have to be a part of it. And we're maybe a more vulnerable part of it that has less cookies in the cookie jar to spend on stuff, and so the way we use our dollars is just maybe feels more stressful than how Bettendorf might be like, oh yeah, we can just, they have more cookies. Yeah. They've got a little bit more cookies.
It's a lot easier to pay for a membership to the gym when you have a good income coming in.
Yeah.
When times get tight, you start cutting those memberships.
Right.
But then you cut opportunities for growth, which helps put more of those cookies back in the jar.
Right. It's kind of like if you didn't work out and you didn't go to the gym, and then you end up with a bigger healthcare bill down the road because you haven't been investing in your infrastructure, of your human body.
Well, and that kind of gets back to what I was talking about, realizing how difficult it is to figure out how to resource some of these nice to have things like historic preservation. Because when I was first on council, I very much had the attitude of like, cut the contract with the Chamber, screw that, fund historic preservation. But it's like, well, actually, we do need that contract with the Chamber. They do offer some services to the city of Rock Island that are useful. So now I got to figure out how to fund both the Chamber and historic preservation.
Right. And Visit Quad Cities is probably a part of that. They're trying to bring people to travel to the region.
Yeah.
If you think about Pride Fest or different parades or events, they can go between cities. It becomes kind of a regional alternating currents. You know, it's a hard conversation, like you're saying, because these activities are bringing people to a region.
Yeah.
And the hope is that once they get to the region, even if the Sterilite factory is built elsewhere, that Rock Island can work so much on our unique identity that an employee or a executive would be like, but I want to live in Rock Island.
That's where our regional partners, whether the Chamber of Commerce or Visit Quad Cities, backs away and says, okay, now you all fight it out, right? Mm-hmm. We brought them here. Now you all fight it out about where they're going to live and shop and play and stuff like that. Dari is a different story. Dari is an interesting partner. I've been along for a fun ride with Dari since 2017. When I was first elected in 2017, we didn't have the Rock Island Downtown Alliance. We had the Downtown Rock Island Partnership, which was a tentacle of Rock Island Economic Growth Corporation, which is a tentacle of Dari. All these organizations are kind of connected. But back, Dari has been the organization historically that supported downtown place management. They, in partnership with the district, which was its own separate nonprofit organization that organized things like Gumbo Yaya and Jamaica My Weekend, Dari worked for those big festivals that Rock Island was always known for the district. They did a lot of, Growth was the developer that developed a lot of the properties in downtown Rock Island that have been developed over the past couple of decades. Sala Flats, Goldman Apartments, the different big residential conversions that have taken place since the 90s. But Dari sort of had that real estate, like Growth developed them, but then Dari owned them. And so they were sort of like a landlord in downtown Rock Island. But in 2019, 2018, Dari sort of realized that they don't do downtown place management anymore. The district was sunsetting. They were kind of re-envisioning what they were. And they pivoted to, in 2020, I think it was, they signed an economic development services agreement with the city to refocus to citywide economic development and not do downtown place management anymore. No more events programming like Gumbo Yaya and Jamaica My Weekend. No more real estate development, ownership, landlording, stuff like that. Business incubation. Dari owned the Shops on 2nd, that business incubator in downtown Rock Island.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that was all Dari. And Dari, for a variety of reasons, decided that they wanted to try a different approach. And so they have shifted to citywide economic development, being a partner for the city. Really, the way that it kind of works, so Dari has a staff, and the city economic development department has a staff. And
how many staff people are on each team? Do you know?
2 each.
2 and 2?
2 and 2. And, both Dari and the city refer to it as Rock Island Economic Development Team. Even though it's 2 separate organizations, they try to work seamlessly together. Kind of the way that it's working out right now is that the city of Rock Island kind of goes out and makes contact with, I'll give you an example. Here's a really good example of when it worked well. ALM Positioner is a manufacturer in the Southwest Rock Island Industrial Park. They do like robotics, high-tech manufacturing, stuff like that. Yeah, they build the arms that then weld like John Deere equipment and stuff like that, right?
That's a company we have in Rock Island?
Yeah, ALM Positioner. The city became aware that ALM Positioner wanted to move to the Iowa Quad Cities, like many businesses have, right? And so we engaged Dari, our economic development partner citywide, and our economic development team in Rock Island, and went to work and building a relationship. Rebuilding the existing relationship with ALM and the city. To really understand, okay, why are you moving? What do you actually need here? What are you hoping to accomplish by moving to the Iowa Quad Cities? Dari's staff are really good at slicing and dicing incentives. They know new market tax credits. They know low-income housing tax credits. They know historic preservation tax credits. They know grants from the state of Illinois. They know how to slice and dice and layer like a slice of lasagna, different economic development incentives available from a variety of partners into making up a financing package for a business, right? And that's what happened. So our city staff made contact with AML and said, how can we help you? They understood what's going on. What do they actually need? Dari was able to identify actually a grant from the state of Illinois that's not available from the state of Iowa that exactly fulfilled what ALM was trying to do. And so they helped ALM apply for that grant, and the state of Illinois gave ALM that grant.
Wow.
And so actually, the end of the story is that ALM stayed in Rock Island and expanded their location in Rock Island after working with our economic development team here in Rock Island. So,
yeah. So and anytime, I mean, do you guys ever do at the end of the year review where you kind of show the public? Because those stories I feel like are very powerful. Like we pay this much money, but we kept this one company, and that, stopped us from losing this, and it increased our whatever by this dollar. I feel like that would be really powerful because there's all these little things behind economic development, and when you don't understand how it works, it can kind of feel confusing. Well, either like nothing's happening, or like, well, only certain people get the development, or
everybody thinks that Matt Stern gets special treatment, but nobody knows about ALM Positioner and the amount of support that the city gave ALM, for example, right? No, the city could do a better job. I mean, yes, there will be a study session at the end of the year where Dari comes in and shares all the statistics. We had, $50 million worth of private investment in the city this year. We had this number of projects in the pipeline, blah, blah, blah. But those are a study session that absolutely nobody sees. And so that information...
Well, I'll do a little podcast about it, and then...
Thank you. And so people don't hear about it.
Yeah.
I think that is an area that we could improve, is better publicizing this information so that the public understands what is happening. There are a lot of positive economic development stories that happen in Rock Island, but a lot of the time they're industrial, like ALM Positioners. That's not like the sexy new Top Golf simulator that people want to see, right? And so it's a mismatch between, the residents of Rock Island want to see retail, entertainment, dining, and our economic development base is industrial. We've always been a factory town. And so
a lot of our factories are hidden, though.
100%.
You don't see them. They're on the riverfront. Yeah. They're let's see, a lot of them are west of the city.
Yeah, it's Sunset Industrial Park.
Yeah, so it's hard to, you can't see them. So it feels like they don't exist.
Right. Yeah, but they very much do. And we work hard to build up our industrial base and keep those businesses and employers happy. There's been Crawford Company has done an enormous amount of expansion in West Rock Island. But that's not, again, the golf simulators that people want to see. So there's still a lot of frustration among the public about economic development in Rock Island. Concluding our conversation about economic development partners, then you have your local economic development partners. The story of the Rock Island Downtown Alliance coming into existence is that Dari decided they didn't want to do downtown place management anymore. And so then it was kind of like, well, if Dari's not going to do downtown place management, who is?
Dylan.
Yeah, exactly. And so the long story of the mayor's task force, which then made a recommendation to create a special service area to fund a downtown place management organization in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, is how we got to where we're at today.
And I heard you say in a meeting, this has been 8 years in the making, and what you're seeing downtown now is like the culmination of years of work, and it's really exciting, and it's hard not to go down there, and you can't really go downtown Rock Island now and say nothing's happening. Yeah. I mean, stuff is happening.
Stuff is indeed happening. Much more needs to be done, and it takes time, but stuff is certainly happening, and I'm very excited. And frankly, figuring out this sort of institutional mess, like this was not clear when I was first elected in 2017, right? Understanding everyone's roles and responsibilities and who does what and who's good at what was not clear, and I cannot stress that enough. When I was first elected in 2017, it was a confusing mess as to who's doing what with respect to economic development, and it has taken years for us to hammer out these economic development services agreement that we have with the chamber to specifically say, okay, you're responsible for handling stuff from Intersect Illinois, and this is what you're going to give the city. Hammering out economic development services agreement with Dari that says, okay, your job is to slice and dice the incentive package. That's what you're good at. Do that. It's taken years to hammer out a services agreement with the Rock Island Downtown Alliance to say, okay, your job is to pick up the litter and whatever else, and this takes years of negotiating and lawyering with these different organizations to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what their lane is. And we're starting to see it work. And like you say, like you can't say that nothing is happening in downtown because we finally have defined the lanes and who does what, and the toy has been wound up, and now it's kind of just going out on its own.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting.
Well, and as a person in the public, what I just like or appreciate is always being able to go somewhere on the city website and see, I want to see that contract between the city and Dari. I want to see the contract between the city and the Downtown Alliance. Who got paid what, right, and what were their deliverables? And then I want to know a year from now what was done. Like, did they deliver? And if they did, yay. And we're having them do it again. And if they didn't, where's that follow through? Or, I mean, I think that is part of having an informed citizenry and one that feels like they can kind of wade through who got what money and what did they build with it? What was the return on investment for the city? Right. And at the end of the day, after the dust clears, are the residents of Rock Island better off? Yeah. And so if you keep a big robotics factory in Rock Island, obviously we're all better off for having that industry here, for industrial placemaking, for the tax base, to not have another empty building. Yeah. But I think that storytelling from start to finish is so important.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Actually, it's funny that you bring this up. Last week, I emailed the city manager and said, we need to put a website on the city's we need to put a web page on the city's website that lists all of the different services contracts that we have with Visit Quad Cities, Chamber of Commerce, Dari, Rock Island Downtown Alliance, for this very point, so that people can see what types of relationships we have and what we expect of them. The other thing that I would say is that I've also come to appreciate how much work it is to manage all of this stuff, and somebody's got to do that work. And sometimes in a cash-strapped community like Rock Island, it's really hard to justify paying somebody to do that, even though we all recognize that it's really important. The city manager will tell you point blank in the face, I would love to have an assistant city manager that could better manage these relationships that we have, but try to get the city council to increase property taxes to fund an assistant city manager position. It's very difficult to make that pitch.
Right.
And so, we could do a better job at telling that story, or having some sort of dashboard on the website about different contracts that we have with different partners and what are their deliverables. All of that stuff exists. I see it all the time. It's just not collected in an easily digestible place.
Yeah.
And the reality is it costs money to pay somebody to put all that together in an easily digestible way.
Right.
And we can't justify paying that person when water bills are going up, when we don't have enough police officers as it is. That's one of those nice to have things,
right,
and not necessarily a need to have thing. And so it's hard to justify it.
But as long as the raw data is up there, then residents can also put that together for themselves and have conversations. And, that is so helpful. Like, that overview for me is so helpful. And I think it
taken me 8 years to figure it out. Happy to share it.
Because sometimes I've, in the past, and I am so guilty of this, of when I don't understand something, I can get a little paranoid.
Sure.
Like,
it's all a conspiracy.
It's all a conspiracy. When you don't know what the story is, your head is
I'm seeing it 100% in the Mylan Bottoms thing. I mean, so many people are spinning out all sorts of crazy conspiracies because, in some reasons, justifiably, the city doesn't have the answers for things. And so in the absence of information, people come up with whatever justification they want to come up with.
Yeah, my new to the party view of that is I would like to see an agreement that really spells out, what is the anticipated revenue if that dispensary keeps their other location in Milan, you know, what's the competition there? Will that drive business away from the new storefront? Or does, I guess I would like to see some sort of financials, and maybe that stuff is private because it's a private company.
Yeah.
But if the city council gets to see it, I assume when you engage in that type of legal agreement where you're giving sales tax back, or you're giving that the city has a right to know your financial health and
No.
what your no. Oh, I did something with the city of Davenport, and I had to turn over pretty detailed, because they want to know, like, what is your revenue coming in, and are you going to be able to do what you say you're going to do? And so the city can't request that, or it's just choosing not to because we're so hungry for this development.
In some instances we have. So for example, the city, during the Rebuild Downtown Rock Island construction project a couple months, 6 months ago now, in the middle of that construction project, when businesses were really suffering from the roads being all torn up, the city handed out cash grants to a number of businesses in downtown Rock Island that were struggling. QC Coffee and Pancake House, Circa 21, a lot of the dining establishments in downtown Rock Island that were immediately adjacent to the construction. As a part of that, we asked to see businesses' financial information. We wanted to see demonstration that their revenues were affected, that they were dropping. For example, we didn't want to give money to a business if they weren't actually struggling, for example. So it's not that we don't ever ask for financials, but it is not the case that every single development agreement we ask for incentives. And I guess what I'm getting at is it depends on the purpose of the incentive based on what we ask for.
Okay.
Right? So again, the development agreement with A. Hannah Illowa, which is Mastern and Jeff Eubanks development company that's doing the Milan Bottoms thing, that development agreement, which is on the city's website, which you can read, it's on one of the previous council agendas when we approved it, that development agreement was for the construction of the building. It was not for like operational support for the business. So there are expectations of the business by the city for like completion dates. You have to complete this project within 3 years. You have to report what kind of expenses you have when it comes to the constructing of the building. You can only claim certain expenses related to construction for the incentives that the city is offering. And so you have to demonstrate, this is what I spent on materials, labor, etc., right? So in that way, the business owner is going to have to show financials to the city. But the incentives that the city offered that developer were related to just constructing the place, not like operational support. And
so another thing, because I did that article about the TIF and the way that works, the developer is paying for everything up front. Right. So the city is not giving them it's not like the city is saying, here's a $6 million loan, or here's $6 million. So the developer pays for everything, but then the city is basically reimbursing them or paying them back over a period of some time. And is this deal going to be in the form of sales tax? So whatever they...
Both.
Okay.
Sales tax and property tax.
Okay, so is that called property tax abatement?
Yeah.
So they won't...
TIF.
So through the TIF, they won't... they'll pay the property tax, but it'll go right back to them.
Yes, they will pay the property tax, but the increment difference between what the property tax is currently for the property and what the property tax for the property will be after construction, that increment difference will go back to the developer up to a certain amount.
Okay, and then they'll get the 1% back on the sales tax revenue.
Right.
And for marijuana sales, that sales tax revenue is larger than if they were selling food, or is there no difference? It's just whatever they sell, they'll get to keep 1% more of it than they would have otherwise, kind of thing.
Well, sales tax applies to all products sold within the city. There's an additional food and beverage tax on top of sales tax that like restaurants have to pay in addition to sales tax. But as far as the sales tax, all businesses pay that same rate. Now, we created the business development district, which is an additional sales tax on products sold within that district where the development is going to be. And
that's the BDD.
That's the BD, Business Development District.
Okay.
Similar to a TIF, a Tax Incremental Financing District. But that extra 1% sales tax that is for products sold within that BDD will go back to the developer per the development agreement that the city has entered into with the developer.
So if I go eat at Arthur's in my ward, I don't know if that's in my ward, but if I won't have that tax there. No. But if I were going to the casino, because it's in that new district, I'd have an additional sales tax I would pay there, and then that would go into the BDD, and that and the TIF would start to reimburse this AHANA. It would start to reimburse them for the cost of, putting the business there. And that's how that works.
Exactly. Up to a certain amount.
So, so I guess if you don't know what their revenue is going, are you kind of thinking like, well, no matter what they bring in sales tax themselves, the property tax on the building will be sufficient? Or do you feel like you need some sort of sales tax guarantee or projection from them? Because wouldn't their own sales tax be going back to them too? Like helping? They're also in the BDD.
I think the way that I think about it is that we are incentivizing constructing the property.
Okay.
We're incentivizing constructing it. We're not incentivizing them to locate in Rock Island, which will generate sales tax. The incentives are connected to building the building.
So kind of that placemaking.
Sure.
Is having the building there feels important for that community, for that district, for...
you can't have sales without the building, right? And so however much, I guess, the development agreement, how do I want to say this? I didn't think about how much sales tax the property will generate as a way to consider the development agreement. I considered just the construction of the building. How much does it cost? The developer is going to spend $15 million to build this facility. And that's just construction costs alone. That's not the cost of running the business. That is just, it's going to be a $15 million building. And so just as the city is negotiating right now with Fresh Films on constructing a film production studio in downtown Rock Island and an incentive package regarding building that studio in downtown Rock Island, we also are negotiating with Hannah Illawa for building this $15 million building. And so the incentives are to make more affordable the building of the building. The incentives are not related to anticipated sales tax that this location will generate. Obviously we're aware that we want buildings in Rock Island because they will generate sales tax, but the incentive is connected to how much does it cost to build the building, not how much do we anticipate you will generate in sales tax, for example.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking, because in my little article I linked when Bettendorf did the TBK, because I think some people are like, well, why do you need a TIF? But TIFs are used everywhere. They're pretty ubiquitous. They can be really misused. Sure. But, they talked about like, okay, the building's going to get built, this complex, and it's required to have this valuation after it's built.
Yep.
And then on top of that, it generates sales tax. So you get the two things, the property tax and the sales tax. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's complicated.
It very much is.
It is. TIFs are kind of complicated, because then that tax increment, you go from a $300,000 property you're selling it for, and then you have a $15 million building. So the difference there in the property tax gets held in a fund, and then that fund pours back into that area. Yeah. So not just back to AHANA, but back to anyone in those boundaries who maybe the casino needs a new exterior sign,
Yep.
or you can provide something for however those boundaries end up getting drawn. But it's confusing, Dylan. And I think it's hard for the average resident to understand.
I understand, and I agree. And I've got 8 years of being as deep into this as you can get.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, you've seen me in this conversation. I have to think very hard about, okay, how does this work? Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
It's complicated, but that doesn't mean that it's bad or suspicious or anything like that. It's just complicated. I mean,
you could end up like in front of a bulletin board with some red string, just, putting your little pins on everything. And because
Yeah.
I think that I think I'm normal in that
Yeah.
when stuff happens and you don't understand it, and you can feel this sense of, can I trust my city government?
Right.
Can I trust the people?
Yeah.
And I'm very guilty of that. Like, but I think conversations like this, or, I was like, how do you figure out what happened with the TIF? Well, I was doing research on it, and there is a report that you guys
Mhm.
put out every year on every TIF, and you can go and look at how the money got spent. And,
Yep.
So I think there are documents and stuff. It's
Yep.
just kind of trying to pull them together and do the research, because one of the roles of local media or local people just having an eye on local politics is holding people accountable,
Yeah.
so that a county clerk doesn't rip off the county for tons of money,
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when that disappears and you don't have someone or a group of people looking at things, it is bad. Like,
Yeah.
you want people to be looking over the shoulder of their government and deals all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your mind doing it. You don't
Well,
want
and
to
that's
get...
why, I mean, like the Save Mylan Bottoms Facebook page, I interact with them all the time, and I try to give them, they ask me questions, and I give them answers. I link documents, I provide maps, whatever it is that they're wanting. It's because all of this is, legal, like you can get it through a FOIA request or whatever, and so like it may as well just share this information. But also, I do understand how everybody thinks that they're, uncovering some grand conspiracy when they don't understand what's going on. And if I can try to alleviate some of that by sharing information. I mean, I build relationships with reporters all the time because I want them to cover what we're doing, because it's important for my constituents. I have a lot of faith in my constituents that they are intelligent, caring people, and that if they have the same amount of information that I have access to, they would come to similar, if not the same, conclusions that I come to. And it's not like I have some supernatural power to, be on the city council and I'm wiser or anything. No, I'm just like everybody else. And so, like, I don't have to worry about my votes on city council, because I trust if my constituents have the same information that I do, they can sit there and say, okay, I can see why you had to raise my property taxes, or why you had this development agreement with Stern, or why you partnered with the Chamber of Commerce to create the Rock Island Downtown Alliance. I mean, so many things are controversial at first. And then people understand, and you take some time to educate, and you take some time to explain what's going on, and they, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and I support it. I see it, I mean, in the 8 years that I've been on city council, over and over and over again, we do something, everybody starts out by saying, what are you doing? This is corruption, and then like, this is like, I mean, the special service area and the partnership with the chamber to run the Rock Island Downtown Alliance was so controversial when it was first introduced. And now you don't hear anything. All you hear now is, man, I love those dudes in the red shirts picking up the garbage downtown.
Yeah.
That rules.
Yeah.
And all of the controversy has dissipated. Some of Jack Cullen's harshest critics during that process of setting up the special service area are now on the board of directors for the Rock Island Downtown Alliance.
He's done a really good job too, though. We lucked out.
100%. Jack is a top-tier Rock Islander. I love that dude.
Yeah, and I know he was doing some little updates for residents, and I mean, I think there's just, I don't know. It's talking, it's sharing information. It's also knowing how to get information. Yeah. It's, and it's the vision of the city, and you entrust your representatives to kind of carry out a vision. So one could make the argument that keeping the Mylan Bottoms a natural landscape 100%, from maybe there'd be ecotourism someday.
Yeah.
And I can see as a region, how beautiful would that be? And we have a lot of financial pressing needs in Rock Island. So it's really complicated. I mean, I would love to just be like, let's all just live in nature and, but also then you're facing, I know Jenny said you're facing having to raise property taxes then, and we have an aging population here, and we don't have the median income in our city that other cities have. And will those, like you said, I didn't really go to Iowa a lot when I was a kid, but as I became an adult, I'm always over in Iowa. My kids have stuff over there, or I have one office over there. So I feel like we go to Iowa more as Illinois people, and the Iowa people aren't necessarily coming over here to eat at the restaurants and buy stuff over here. And so we have to make different decisions, and it is hard.
I think that's abating a little bit. I think many years ago we were unique communities kind of smushed next to each other, but every single community has its own shopping district, had its own whatever, and we're getting regionalized. And that's just part of technology, communication, just how things go, transitioning from every single town having its own cobbler to now you just need one Walmart, right? Yeah. And so instead of every community having a cobbler, now one community gets a Walmart and everyone else feeds into it. So it's sort of the transition and the way technology grows and changes communities.
Well, and it is, and I don't know how much time you have, so if you are feeling a need to run out of here, but
I'm good until 4.
Okay, it is too, I mean, and just to talk about some of the philosophy behind it, but capitalism is probably the best system that the world has come up with so far.
Sure. But
taken to its logical end, it is a system of efficiency. It's like monopoly. If you want to prioritize everything around the almighty dollar, you will get rid of smaller entities. You will push everything toward one place to purchase. You will amass wealth in smaller groups of people who are more like at the top, I guess.
Yeah. And
so you said that you're a democratic socialist, but they're still capitalists, right? Am I thinking of that right?
Democratic socialists are still capitalists?
Yes.
No.
Aren't they?
No.
I think, but aren't they kind of?
No.
Okay. I thought they were just like a different flavor of capitalist.
Most democratic socialists will say that they are anti-capitalist, that they are not capitalist.
Okay.
I mean, this all gets very confusing. It's like, do you consider the People's Republic of China a capitalist country? I mean, it's still considered communist, but it has open markets. It has privately owned firms. At what point, what are we meaning by these words?
Yeah.
Socialism, capitalism, communism. It all gets really blurred. So I have found less and less benefit in
labeling
this sort of stuff. I mean,
the way I read it is like any system taken all the way to its extreme is bad.
Sure.
No matter which one it is.
Yeah, I think balance is a key aspect of life, and that includes economies, communities. Balance is extremely important. Anything taken to an extreme means being out of balance, and that is unsustainable. That doesn't work.
So what is a democratic socialist? That is a Sweden? That is my homeland? Is it
the
Scandinavia?
Nordic communities?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people point to the Nordic communities as sort of democratic socialist examples. Strong welfare states, some public ownership. I mean, so the most simplest way to break it down is that socialists believe in the democratic ownership and control of the means of production. This is sort of Karl Marx 101, right?
So OpenAI would be an example of that, right? Like, well, we don't own it though.
Yeah.
We all use it. Okay, we all use it, but we don't.
Right?
So if we all owned OpenAI, that would be...
So in historical context, socialist governments have nationalized industries, right? So instead of Amazon being owned by private owners, the government comes in and nationalizes Amazon and says now the entire country owns Amazon, and the shareholders of Amazon are the citizens of the United States, and the government is going to put in the board of directors and the executive team at Amazon to steward this company not in a profit-generating, profit-seeking motive that capitalism operates in, but rather how the public thinks that the company should work. That's sort of your classic socialist model of the means of production, so the factory, the equipment, the tools. And again, like Karl Marx was in the 19th century, so things have gotten a lot more complicated over the centuries with financialization and all sorts of other stuff. But if you think about your 19th century capitalism, instead of the means of production, the factory building, the equipment, the contracts with labor, the electricity to operate the factory, instead of all of that being owned privately by one guy, the boss, that instead all of that is owned and operated collectively by workers or the public. That is what socialists believe in. Democratic socialism is an offshoot of socialism that is explicitly anti-autocratic. And in history, you have examples of socialist systems that were autocratic, like Stalin's USSR. Democratic socialists believe that, no, we don't want that. We don't want socialism done through...
We don't want it done to us, despite our objection.
Yes, exactly. We don't want a socialist
a one
king.
leader who's like, I've got it. I've figured it all out. Now bend the knee.
So you'll see, a lot of democratic socialists object to China, for example, because China is arguably autocratic. And even though they consider themselves, and in some ways are communist, they're a more autocratic vein of the socialist tradition. And so democratic socialists are hostile or opposed to that type of communist or socialist government.
So you've got the communists, the socialists, the democratic socialists, the capitalists. What else do you have? Is that it? Or are there like more? Are there more ways?
I mean, there's the anarchists. There's the libertarians.
Libertarians would be different than capitalists.
I think so. I mean, it kind of depends again on how we're defining capitalists, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are capitalists that believe in regulation, that believe that markets can only exist in a well-regulated economy. And then there are more libertarian capitalists that believe in completely free markets and that there should be no government regulations whatsoever.
If you have a 5-year-old that is really good at sewing,
you should put them to work.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, even within capitalists, there are a variety of opinions of what is capitalism, right? Is it pure free markets? Is it government intervention? I'm sure that all of the people who are supporting Trump's tariff policies consider themselves capitalists, but that's effectively government intervention in the free market, and it is quite uncapitalist, or at least that sort of traditional free market liberal capitalist.
Yeah, you're interfering with the way things would naturally unfold in a free market.
Exactly.
And that capitalism, when it's done to its most efficient end in the world, things don't get made in America because it's not efficient. It costs more. It's, you're starting to introduce these other variables like quality of life and a healthy citizenry. And so it's not pure. We don't live in a pure capitalist society anyway.
No.
But yeah, because I've noticed like you are more outspoken in your social media. Like you talk about your ideas and how you think about the world. And are you a more outspoken older person? And how is that for you?
Yeah. Yes, I consider myself a more outspoken older person. I certainly have a much more present online presence than some of my colleagues on city council. Part of it is just because this stuff interests me. And again, I'm still that college kid that's smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee down at Theo's Java Club that's talking about what is the difference between anarchism, socialism, communism, and capitalism, right? I mean, I'm an intellectual, guilty as charged. I like thinking about this stuff. And I try to make sure that my actions on city council adhere to some sort of conceptualization of what I want in the world and why I'm doing the things that I am doing on city council. Some sort of reason or justification or explanation that aligns with my values and my vision for where I want Rock Island or the country or whatever. And so
I heard you talking about the participatory budgeting that the West End is doing.
Yeah.
So you were kind of in the last city council meeting that I listened to, that was last Monday night.
Yep.
You were saying like, oh, it would be cool if the city would follow the example of the West End revitalization and have people affected by the budgeting decisions be present and give feedback. And is that an example of democratic socialism, or kind of the folks most affected are part of the process? You're not just having a city manager decide this is the most effective use of our funding.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that my desire to see more participatory budgeting in the city of Rock Island comes out of a place of the socialist tradition of, ultimately my identity as a socialist comes from a very basic idea that everyone is equal, that everyone should have the same right to everything that everyone else has, and that nobody is, there are some people that believe that some people are just innately better or more capable of running a company or, leading a nation or whatever. And I think that that's all just a bunch of baloney. And I think that really we're all very similar. Some of us have more opportunities than others. Some of us got lucky or whatnot. But fundamentally, we're all the same. And we're all, in my opinion, should have the same opportunity in life. And so, advocating for more participatory budgeting comes from that identity of being a socialist and that commitment to all people, no matter who you are, that you have the capability, you have the power to participate in government, in these institutions that govern our lives, whether it be work. I'm a big proponent for unions, for that same idea, that unions are a way to level power between employers and employees, and that just because bosses are bosses doesn't mean that they should have autocratic control over all aspects of your life as a worker, but that you, in conjunction with working together with your employees, can level that playing field and exert some of your own power. So whether it be unions at workplaces or participatory budgeting through municipal governments, these are ways to elevate everyone's individual power because we all deserve it, in my opinion. And that comes from that identity as a socialist.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I think it helps to have something grounding how you show up in that role and to have thought through those things. And even if another council member has a different perspective, if you're both grounded in some kind of like theory or idea or North Star about, an example of that is free speech.
Right.
If you deeply value free speech, you have to value it when you like it and when you don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I think having, in therapy, in my therapy world, there's a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of it is you get really clear about what your values are so that as you're going through your life and you're at those forks in the road, you can rely on your values to help show you which path you're supposed to walk down, and to be less reactive to like, I really didn't like what he said, so I'm just going to go in the opposite direction. It's like, no, you take a breath. What is my value here? What is my North Star? And so I can see how that would be helpful as you're trying to make decisions for the city.
Yeah, and because you never can predict what types of decisions you're going to be expected to make on the city council. 8 years ago when I first ran for city council, I had no way to predict that I would be sandwiched into this controversy about whether we should develop this land next to a wetland. Sure, you can have broad sort of, I'm an environmentalist, but really the nitty gritty, here's your choice, A or B. What are you going to do? You can't predict what the decision, or not the decision, but you can't predict what choice you're going to have to make. And so that is where you just rely on your values. And I'm less, like kind of how we started this conversation of like, well, what's a socialist? What's a capitalist? I'm increasingly less interested in sort of these, if you're a socialist, then you support ABC, that you support nationalization, period, if you're a socialist. And it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I don't. And maybe I can be a socialist that doesn't support nationalization because we've seen examples of nationalization not working. And maybe, effectively, it's me questioning dogma and being like, just because this tradition is associated with this policy or this method doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be. And again, I go to my values, my roots, like we were just talking about egalitarianism, equality, universal human rights, etc., to really define when I approach a thing like, should I support the Mylan Bottoms development or not? It's not just, well, what are the socialists saying?
And they're all confused.
They're all confused.
As we've gotten into the last decade, I would say all the old labels, it's like the groups that are adhering to them have shifted. The people who are talking about values that might fit better in one camp than another are all mixed up and backwards. It's like it's like you can't figure out who's who. So you're kind of saying you're less about the label and more about maybe the values that underpin, whatever that. I just think, can we make up our own new system? That's what I'd like to do.
Well, not at the municipal level.
Can we become the autocrat? Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't think at the municipal level we're going to.
Yeah.
I think states are maybe experimenting with some of this, but ultimately, I mean, these are much bigger questions that nations have to struggle with.
Yeah.
That we are way downstream here at the municipal level. And, I deal with this. I argue with socialists online more often than with conservatives, which is mind-boggling. But, it's sort of recognizing the limitations that the municipal government in the United States has, right? I mean, again, take the Mylan Bottoms as an example. People want the city. People keep on saying, why develop there? You should develop someplace else, like 11th Street or downtown. And I'm like, you're effectively arguing for central planning, which is not the economic model that the United States has. We have capitalism, which does not do central planning. And if our entire national and state system is set up to allow for free market participation of development, where developers choose where they want to develop, then trying to insert the city of Rock Island to do central planning doesn't work. I mean, the system's not built that way. And so, all of these constituents and fellow, lefties are calling for central planning. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah,
I don't know what you want me
to force or coerce someone into
There are
doing.
state laws that govern this. There's federal laws that govern this. I mean, the state or the city cannot do central planning activity. And so we're at the whims of higher governments.
I mean, and I think it's an interesting question for anyone listening to really think about, what is the role of my government nationally, at the state level, and at the city level? Like, what is it that I think my city government is here to do? And what are the limitations of what that city government can do? And what is my role as a citizen in that system? What am I supposed to be doing? Yeah. What is my call to action? It's because I think everyone has a different idea about what the government should do. And and sometimes, like, you can be of two minds. I don't want the government involved in this, but I want them super involved in this. And, so everyone should create their own little, kind of North Star for, like, this is what I think the role of government is, and this is what I think it isn't. And they could refer to the Constitution or those sorts of the principles, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's been one of the main things that I've learned in my 8 years of being on city council is that people do not make decision based off of reason. They make decision based off of emotion. And I'm sure that you know this, being a therapist. The number of times, when I first was elected to city council, I tried to make the case with data and fact and blah, blah, blah.
That's what I do.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it doesn't work. I can have the most data-centered argument about why we should do something in City Hall for Rock Island, and it lands flat on its face. It doesn't go anywhere. Figuring out that people make decision based off of emotion is really helpful in understanding how to be more effective and how to not be so frustrated. I used to be really frustrated that my ideas weren't going anywhere, even though I thought I had all the answers and all the figures. And I think that that's being an academic college student, sort of my culture is very much that. I'm going to research and write a report and blah, 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 but I have to remember that that's just one way in which people make decisions, and it's no better than somebody else's way. It just is a different way. And so, I used to, for example, like argue or debate with constituents on Facebook. And I certainly still participate in social media. Like you said, I have a strong presence on social media and I put a lot out there. But if you read through the comments, occasionally I'll provide maybe a clarifying statement or something like that. But if somebody just disagrees with me,
you're not there to throw down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We're not going to agree on everything, and just kind of figuring out like, oh, no amount of reasoning with this person is going to get them to agree with me, because we're not necessarily making decisions based off of reason. We're making decisions based off of emotion or identity or these different factors that I have no control over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is so, I feel like I've been saying this, but I have this underpinning for myself, which is that internal family systems. It's a type of therapy lens. And the premise of it is that we have different parts of us that show up in our lives at different times. Mm-hmm. So, if I'm going into something, interact with someone who's challenging for me, a part of me kind of shows up. I don't show up as my complete self.
Right.
Definitely not online.
Right.
But maybe the fighter, the helper, the defender, the sympathizer, mm-hmm. And so I think part of the trick for a society too is to, whatever shows up, to find ways to say hello, not uh-oh.
Yeah.
When someone shows up at city council and they're fired up, to say hello and have other people in the community to listen and hear. It might not even be city council members.
Right.
But to say like, whoever showed up is important and has something valuable for the system, is trying to protect something for the system. And sometimes when that part is heard, it can kind of sit over here next to me on the couch, and then I can get to this other layer of, okay, now what's here?
Yeah.
Now that my anger's quieted down, now what's here? And maybe it's a bunch of fear. Maybe it's feeling alone. Maybe it's got something to do with my attachment relationship to my mother. I don't know.
Yeah,
I love my mother. We have a good attachment. But I'm just saying, like, there's so many layers to humans that, I've felt it before, like mm-hmm. advocating for something and kind of almost feeling out of body, like mm-hmm. you can get so worked up. And mm-hmm. then I've witnessed people be worked up, and I just have so much compassion for them, even when I disagree. Like,
yeah, you see it all the time and during public comment during the city council meetings, right? I mean, learning how to not personalize public comment is a huge benefit for elected officials, right? I mean, we have so many people standing at the podium, whether it be about the Jakarta Jackson shooting or the
mm-hmm.
Milan Bottoms, just people personally insulting you and accusing you of being corrupt and, greasy palms and not caring about people getting killed and all sorts of stuff, And if you listen to it, you can get really defensive and you can get really upset. And that's not me. I care, But that's a bad idea. You don't want to go down that road. And learning how to not personalize that and just to understand, to just listen. I mean, the benefit that I've learned of just shutting up and listening has been like a millionfold. It is so important for elected officials to learn how to listen. There's an old union organizing phrase about 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Like, there's a reason you got 2 of them versus 1 mouth. And so just shut up and listen to people. And it does allow, like, if somebody is burning hot and they come to that public comment and they say, you all suck and you let the cops kill this person and I can't believe that and this, that, and the other thing. If you take it all personally and you get defensive, well, then you're just going to fight and there's going to be no resolution, right? You're going to call each other idiots online, whatever the case may be. But if you're able to just let that flow off your back, realizing that it's not talking about me individually, but this person is angry or hurt or scared or whatever, then you're able to listen to them and be like, what's actually happening here? How can I actually help this person? And maybe they don't need here's the 12-point policy solution that I'm pursuing, but just like an emotional, I validate your experience. I'm sorry that happened to you. Just because I validate somebody's experience doesn't necessarily mean that I admit fault or something, right? But I can recognize that there are people really hurt and really scared and really upset about things like police shootings, for example, to use a really extreme case.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's so important to just listen to people and not take it personally and validate their experience and try to actually come up with like, what do you actually need here? I ask my girlfriend all the time, what do you need here? Do you need to be listened to? Do you need to be helped? Do you need to be heard? You know, like, what is it that you're actually needing in this moment? And that applies to more than just intimate relationships like a girlfriend. It relates to constituents all the time.
Well, I mean, that's like everything that's small is big. Everything that's big is small. And so and I think the city council format is such a terrible place for that public comment to take place, because the people sitting up there, you can't really engage. It's not a place for a dialogue. It's not a place for a conversation. It's like you say your thing and we all sit there and stare at you.
It's very awkward.
It's very awkward, and it's not very healing. It almost, for people who are feeling unheard,
makes it worse.
It makes it worse because you're hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so it's a weird format. It's like you need a debrief after the meeting where people can acknowledge one another's humanity and have conversations. And I know you can't really do that in that format, but it is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate format. And I think it's led to people just yelling at each other and then going back to their separate corners. There's not a lot of, I don't know how you revisit that for a city or a country, but it's a lot of just like screaming at each other and then going back into your little silo.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes if I know the person that's making public comment, I'll shoot them an email afterwards and be like, hey, if you want to talk about this offline, you're more than welcome to. If I don't know them, it's just kind of like, well, there's another person yelling. I don't know. I mean, people are welcome to reach out to me privately, individually. And I tell people that, like, before, I'll have constituents call me and be like, do I need to have me and my neighbors come to a city council meeting and speak up about this? And I was like, no, that's not going to do anything. You know, you coming pitchforks in hand is not going to solve anything. You know, let's try to talk to the right people in City Hall, talk to whatever to come up with a solution here. And sometimes there may not be a solution, but I'll hopefully give you the reason as to why that is the case. And you can understand, like, okay, that's a reasonable reason why they can't help me. But this just sort of like public comment thing is a mess. It's not good.
Yeah, but you need it. I mean, you need it.
Well, it's required by law.
It's required by law and you need it. It's just unfortunate. I don't think it's not a Rock Island problem. It's everywhere. But you know, it's like I'm going to put a couch downstairs and be like, anyone who needs to debrief. And because I have the flaw of anyone who's talking pretty much, I can empathize with and be like, I see your point. Yeah. You know, and so I think it would be really hard to be a decision maker because I can be swayed by whoever I'm around, because I'm like, yeah, I really get why for you, this is the right answer. Right. And for you, this is the right answer. So that would be hard.
It is hard. Yeah. I empathize with people too. Yeah. Well, and it's just kind of like, well, I can see your point of view, but I disagree. Yeah. And you got to get more comfortable with saying, I understand your point of view, but I disagree.
And noticing or recognizing in a representative democracy, we aren't a popular vote society. We do pick a person to represent us to the best of their ability, and you have to kind of be that voice, and people will keep you there as long as they're happy with the job that you're doing. So
they just reelected me, and we'll see where this train goes.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about in your ward, or maybe some other day I'll bug you about the River's Edge development?
Yeah,
but
we should do this again. There's so much to talk about. Yeah. I mean, this is like my favorite thing on the planet. I love the city of Rock Island. I love representing my constituents on city council. I nerd out about this stuff all the time. So any opportunity that you want to talk about the city of Rock Island, I am game. There's so much to talk about, and I regret we weren't able to get to all of it.
I know there's more, and some of the peripheral things I'm trying to do is this Rock Island think tank, which would be kind of like a fun social club, but just people who believe in Rock Island, who want it to thrive, getting together to do funny things or talk about policy, or trying to kind of help residents understand that, like, when city council can't do something for you, you and some neighbors might be able to make it happen anyway. Or there's power throughout the city. There's power in places where you don't traditionally think there's power. You know, there's interesting, like The Half. I'm so excited about that play that's coming out. Yeah. You know, what if there's like a new theater that comes to Rock Island to, you know, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
We're going to think about things.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Do you have any t-shirt ideas? I'm going to also try to get a little partnership with Ray Gun to make Rock Island merch. And I think of them all the time, but
Yeah.
I think just I Believe in Rock Island is a good one.
Yeah.
My sister came up with that, but
Sounds good to me.
I love Rock Island.
I'll buy one.
You know, can I tell you my really dorky one?
Yeah.
When you were little and you looked at the map of the United States, did your teacher do MIMAL with you? Did you have to do that?
No.
Where it's like Minnesota,
yeah, the baker, or
Iowa,
whatever.
the baker.
Yeah.
Well, his name is MIMAL.
I didn't realize that he had a name. We did do the baker, but I didn't know about the name.
Okay, so based on the states.
Right.
And Rock Island is like MIMAL's booger.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that?
I remember. Yes. Yes.
So that would be a good t-shirt.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
It's a deep cut.
But yeah, well, I'll definitely have you back. And, you know, I appreciate the work that you do on council and appreciate the conversation. And, you know, yeah, if you ever need anything from the Rock Island line, let me know, because I'll write a little fact-finding article or something. So
well, I've been blown away by what you're doing here. It's really cool. I've been sharing it on my social media, and appreciate you having me here today. I appreciate your love for Rock Island, this city that we both care for so much. Keep up the good work and let me know how I can help.
Okay, I will. Thanks so much, Dylan.
Yeah.
Yay, we did it. Did yours stay playing the whole time?
It did.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that I recorded this.